All right, so we're going to finish up that article that we were following the other day from let me go to the page here, to the National Library of Medicine, and it was all about wheelchairs. So now I lost my spot here. Oh, let me get back to it. All right, so yes, we have to think about what type of wheelchair, and sometimes we don't have experience enough to say to the therapist, oh, I'd like this type of wheelchair or that type of wheelchair. I don't know. So, we don't have that training to be able to say that to the doctor or say that to the therapist. So it's kind of important to have the education first so that you can sort things out, think about it, and then tell the therapist, I think this wheelchair would be the best. Now, I only had experience with manual wheelchairs. That's where, I started getting training more and more with manual wheelchairs because I was having some difficulty, especially when I would go out. I would get really tired really fast, and that would be it. And manual wheelchairs were the only kind I knew. And when I spoke to my therapist in the first session that I had with her, she said, we need to start thinking about a wheelchair. And I said, oh, because my wheelchairs either were borrowed or rented or whatever. And so she was thinking, a permanent wheelchair so that I'd have it available for when I went out. So that's really important. If you don't know about wheelchairs, they're just going to order one for you and what they thought, would be your best for you. And sometimes it's important for you to have information so you have the necessary input. And it really depends on your condition. So you can get input from the therapist, but you also have to give input to the therapist so they understand where you're at in terms of wheelchairs and where you live. Do you live in Colorado? Do you live in Germany? Do you live in Switzerland? Do you live in Spain, where it's very hilly? And do you have MS? Do you have fibromyalgia? So all of that contributes to the information that needs to be put on the table to look at what type of wheelchair you need. Is it a manual? They sell a lot of manual wheelchairs, but some of us can't handle manual wheelchairs because we're pain patients. So, I have fibromyalgia on top of other issues, and a lot of nerve pain. So, is a manual wheelchair going to work? Maybe short term, maybe short distance, but not long distance. That would probably kill me. So my therapist said, no, and all I knew was manual wheelchairs. So of course I said, she asked me what type of wheelchair did I think I needed. And I said, well, the only type I know is a manual wheelchair. And, I know how to use them pretty well. And she started shaking her head. I was like, okay. So she said, no, because of your conditions, it would probably be much better to get a power wheelchair. That way you won't hurt yourself. That way you can go farther. That way you can remain more active. So I didn't know anything about power wheelchairs at the time. So she asked me if I knew, did I have a specific wheelchair that I was thinking of? I said, I have no clue. I don't know anything about power wheelchairs. And so she said, well, let's do this. Let's pick a power wheelchair, for the basics, for the time, and then we'll see how it goes. So she really picked the power wheelchair I have now. And, now that I understand, now that I know, now that I've had the practice, and the next turn when I am able and I get permission to upgrade the power wheelchair, then I'll have more knowledge to be able to pick one. So that is, you really, but for the basics, for you and for me, it's really important to consider, do I live in a hilly place? Do I live in a place that's, full of stairs? Do I live in a place that's full of potholes? Do I live in a flat place? Do I live in a desert? Do I, so that's going to be part of it. You're going to need, if you live in a pretty rough environment, you're going to need a rough and tough type of wheelchair, whether it's manual or power, doesn't matter. So here the list goes through the types of wheelchairs, and the basics are power and manual. Real simple. So the question is, the pros and cons for each are: the manual wheelchair is going to be, it's going to require more energy. It's going to require more muscle power for you. So can you do that? Does your health allow you to do that? Or can you handle, or do you need a power wheelchair? And usually power wheelchairs are for those people who have a lot of pain, who have a lot of other issues they need to contend with, and or don't have arms at all. So it really depends on the person and their health and their needs. So a manual wheelchair was not chosen for me because of my pain levels. So I get that. One of the difficulties and the cons for power wheelchairs is how to transport them from point A to point B. So I know countries are becoming more aware of this and are adapting. They're adapting slowly. So sometimes people have to figure it out or purchase a van of some kind, save up money to purchase a van, which is on top of having the power wheelchair. So it's not easy. A manual wheelchair can be taken apart and put it in a car and you go. So you can take it apart and put it in an ox and cart arrangement and you go, and put it back together, and then when you're at point B. so that is, you really have to think of your environment and how you're going to transport your manual wheelchair, how you're going to transport your power wheelchair. Transportation needs to be discussed. So I use the county vans. Sometimes I use the bus, but more times than not I use the county vans, and they're accessible for power wheelchairs. So that discussion has to be between you and your doctor, or between you and the therapist, in terms of how to transportation, your physical needs, what condition you live through. So also you want to make sure, as we were talking above, if you live in China, make sure that wheelchair is made in China or made somewhere close, so that you can ensure that it has parts for if it breaks down. If you're in Germany, then a German wheelchair. They're very good. They have very good wheelchairs over there, and you can get parts much quicker and much faster. Here in the United States, I make sure that, the power wheelchair is made here, that I can get parts, that I'll have somebody to consult if it falls apart. Can I get parts? And I've taken it to the shop about twice to get it checked. So it's good to get your wheelchair checked at least once a year, at least, to make sure it's in good shape. So for you, and again, as I said before, the wheelchair just doesn't pop out of a box. You have to be measured. You have to make sure that it fits kind of like a shoe. It's not how big is a wheelchair, it's what are your physical needs, what is your weight, what is your size, and they take the measurements, and then they make the wheelchair to fit you, not you to the wheelchair. So sometimes when, like this person who was taken in a wheelchair to her clinic, they have ministries and they have organizations that can provide, wheelchairs to people who are really desperate and who are really poor. So if you're running into a brick wall, you need to ask, is there an organization that can help me? Is there a company that can help me? Can I be given time to save up some money? So can I do a crowdfunding? type activity and get money for the wheelchair, because these wheelchairs are well made and they're expensive. So sometimes a clinic will have one, sometimes they won't. In my case, I had insurance, so the insurance would cover it. So, so you have to figure out, who are you going to go with, manufacturers and suppliers, and see which one is going to fit you best. Wheelchair services, as I was talking about before, I went through a company who got the wheelchair for me. So when it's a garage and they work with people with insurance, so they got the wheelchair for me. And so anytime I have any issue, I call them, I make an appointment, I take the wheelchair in so they can service it. So that's really important. Or sometimes people get their wheelchairs through a hospital. The hospital have their own clinic, so you can go to them for any repairs, any checks that you need. So even in a third world country, if you need to check your wheelchair, take it back to where you got it so they can check it and make sure it's all good to go. Even the wheels, if the wheels start peeling or whatever and they're not in good shape, go before they get really, really in bad shape. So professional groups, so that's what I was talking about. Garages and organizations, companies that handle these wheelchairs, and you should, or a clinic in a hospital, inside of a hospital, that is really important to keep that wheelchair up to date and in good shape. So don't think because you walked out the door that you can't talk to them anymore. Of course you can. So here they have a little spot here, Wheelchair Industry Association in Africa. So, in Africa, the Pan-African Wheelchair Builders Association represents those involved in wheelchair design, production, finding, and distribution. The association was formed following a meeting of African wheelchair producers in Zambia in 2003 and now established in Moshi, United Republic of Tanzania. One of its main activities is networking among wheelchair builders to support each other and to share resources. So they do this to help people, just like here in the United States or in New Zealand or Germany or in Spain. People in Africa also need wheelchairs, and they don't have as many resources as Europe would or the Americas. So they found a way. They put together an organization that will connect with each other and figure out how to get XYZ person a darn wheelchair. And a lot of people live in rural areas, and so they have to design wheelchairs that will work in rural areas, wheelchairs that'll work in the city, and it's not easy. So when I was looking at my wheelchair, the guy from the company said, what will you use this wheelchair for? And I said, well, indoors and outdoors for sure. And then a wheelchair that I can go on hikes, go to a park, have some fun. So I'm going to need the wheels to be able to sustain and go through that type of environment. And so they said, okay. So they knew what kind of wheels to choose for my wheelchair. So they chose a type of wheelchair that won't mark up the floors inside the house, and will also be able to handle the streets, the sidewalks, the paths that I go on. So it's really important to figure out what kind of wheels does that person need. There's even an international non-governmental organizations that help with connecting the dots so people can get what they need. So there's also a disabled people's organization that can help to get the people where they need to go and get them the materials they need. Users, families, and caregivers, so there's information on that. So where I've said before, it's some of that and it's all of that, and it's how to connect the dots. There's a wheelchair user at policy and implementation in Uganda. So, I know in China, Japan, they have certain rules. So it's really important to look for the resources, not to give up, but to know the resources, search them out, ask the questions, and people will give you a hand and to get what you need. That's really important. It's really critical. So I'm hoping this information helps you and gives you hope. And always email me or leave messages, and we'll see where you need to go, who you can talk to get the wheelchair you need. All right. Take care. And for sure, I will see you in the next one.